TJ, can you tell me what the advantages of leasing a Honda opposed to buying a Honda are?
Wow, that's a good question. Best reason to lease a car is because it turns your vehicle into an expense versus an asset. Cars are a depreciating asset. They go down in value each month. We know that. It's much the same as like your electricity bill. Every month you have a bill to pay for your electricity, and you get electricity. You can make your car the same way. Every month you can get a bill. This is what it costs to drive your car. And you might go, but then I don't own anything. Well, until your car's actually paid off, you don't own anything anyway. And the idea behind the lease is that you get to buy or lease the best part of the car.
Are there differences between the manufacturers if I was going to lease a Honda opposed to buying leasing a different vehicle?
Sure. Okay, if you're going to lease a car, what you're really looking for is your buying payment at that point. And so depending on what kind of car you want to buy, I always make the joke, if you could go lease a Ferrari for $300 a month and you can afford the insurance, go ahead and get it. Okay, but for the most part, what you're looking for is the car that you want, okay? Make sure that you get the right number of miles that you need. You don't want to have somebody talk you into fewer miles than you need per year to drive the car, and a payment. And on different manufacturers may have different lease in terms. You want to check those. You want to make sure that, like with Honda, they have a $1,500 damage waiver, so they don't nickel and dime you on little dings and dents when you turn the car in. They don't have a disposition fee. Okay, so some manufacturers will charge you a disposition fee at the end, which is extra money that you paid just to turn the car back in to the manufacturer, and that's just money that will come out of your pocket. Also, how much you have to pay if you do happen to go over on your miles. So you want to check all those things out. The nice thing about Honda is that it's extremely transparent. Okay, you know everything up front. There is no disposition fee with the Honda. They do have a $1,500 damage waiver. You know exactly what you'll pay for miles if you go over with Honda. And you know, for the most part with Honda's resale value, there's not a lot of reason to turn your car in. Typically it's best to try and trade it in.
Okay, so you were talking about payments. If I'm going to lease one, should I put money down?
Okay, the way a lease works is that if you and I both lease the same car today, you put $1,000 down, I don't put down anything. The calculation, what we're going to both end up paying over the entire term is going to be the same. So I try to encourage people not to put money down on a lease. And right now with interest rates as low as they are, even though the money factor on a lease is not an interest rate per se, it's still the cost of money is very, very low. You might as well keep the money in the bank and then simply have a little bit higher payment. But like I said, by the time we add up our payments, we will have paid the same amount for the car. So, and what people tend to forget is that if they leased a car and they put several $1,000s down, they have a very low lease payment. Well, then when you come back to release again and you just trade the car, and the idea behind a lease is for your car to be worth what you owe at the end, then your payment will be higher. And you're like, well, why is my payment higher? And I'm like, well, if you'll remember last time you put $3,000 down. So we try and encourage people not to do that, because what you're trying to do with a lease is to just turn your vehicle, your transportation needs, into an expense. And you want that to be consistent. So in 3 years, you want to try to roll into a similar vehicle at a similar payment and just kind of continue on.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people who don't lease because they feel like they're just going to be stuck. And if in 2 years they no longer want to be in that car, they're just, is there anything they can do about that? Or
okay. A lease is like a commitment. It's like a 3-year commitment. Okay. And stuck is not necessarily a good word, but they do need to understand that that is what you're getting the car for, is for 3 years and for X number of miles. So you want to make sure that you think about these things when you go into it. If you only have a 2-year need for a vehicle, you might want to do a 2-year lease. Can you get out of a lease early is a question I get asked all the time. And a lot of times dealerships will just answer yes, because the reality of it is there always is a payoff. Depending on the value of the car, you could get out of it early, but you may not want to because of the valuation of the car. So it's really not a fair statement to say that yes, you can get out. What you really need to consider when you lease a car is that I'm going to have this car for 3 years. Now, Hondas have extremely good resale value. And we have programs, as a lot of dealerships have programs, where we monitor people's leases, and when we believe it's the optimal time for them to get out of the lease, we'll I would contact you and
Okay.
say, hey, would you like to get a 2 or 3 year newer car and keep your payment the same and no money out of your pocket? And most
Nice.
people go, yes. And then they come in and they go, so what's the catch? And we're like, there's no catch. It's just the value that your depreciation has gone down faster than the valuation of your car going down. So when you reach that break-even point, which is what a lease is trying to do anyway, the manufacturer is trying to guarantee, which by the way, it is a guaranteed future value. Okay, a lot of people are concerned about the value of that vehicle at the end. The manufacturer Honda is guaranteeing that value. So if it's worth more, you can take advantage of that and get your money back. If it's worth less, then they basically have to eat it, for lack of a better word. They have to sell it. They're the ones that will take the loss. They're the ones that are betting on the value of their product in the future of what it will be worth, but giving you the full benefit if it's worth more.
That's great.
So you're not stuck, but nobody needs to go into a lease going, oh, I don't know if I really want to keep this car for 3 years. You have to be prepared to keep the car, for 3 years and pay all your payments. Everybody's pretty aware of gas prices.
Yeah.
Okay. And there was a time when gas prices, first went up, several years ago, and there were a lot of people that had vehicles that didn't get that great of gas mileage. I won't mention anything in particular, but a lot of people want to get out of those because the gas was really hurting them, but it affected the value of their cars.
Yes.
And those people that were buying those cars, they had to take those hits.
Okay.
People that leased those cars simply had to get to the end of their lease, and whatever the devaluation on their vehicle was, the manufacturer took it. So they, through parties that they leased a vehicle. So it's kind of like a safety net.
Okay.
I mean, it's a guaranteed future value on your car, and the manufacturer is the one that's really at risk.
So it's basically Honda standing up saying they're proud of their product and they know it's going to stay with value.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they're willing to take that risk, and they're willing to say, this is what we believe this car is going to be worth in 3 years, 2 years, 4 years. Which, by the way, on leasing, the optimal time on these is 3 years. I know that there are shorter term leases, but typically that doesn't work out very well from a payment standpoint. And then there's longer term leases, and the problem with that is that if you take all the benefit of leasing, okay, whereas you're going to have a car for 3 years, it's going to be covered under, if you only do 12,000 miles a year, which you can certainly do more, 15, 18, 20, but just a basic 3-year, 12,000 mile a year lease, you're going to be covered under the manufacturer's warranty the entire time. When you start getting past 3 years, then potentially you're going to have maintenance, tires, brakes, things of that nature, where 3 years, you typically won't have that.
Okay.
So again, your expenses on this car are just going to be your payment and maybe a few tire rotations and oil changes. That's another big benefit of it, is that you don't get into, I've got to do all this maintenance, on my car. So we really try to encourage people to stay at 3 years or less. That's kind of the optimum there. And of course, again, we're going to get in touch with you if it's time to, get out of this car and get into the new one. Hey, get the new one because it's got the new stuff on it. So that's something I always try to point out to people. So back to the original question of, are you stuck? You just need to make sure you're going into it for, the right reasons.
Okay, great. Be prepared for that. Now, how does maintenance work? Is it, like you mentioned it earlier, within 3 years, it's just typically oil changes and tire rotations. Would I need to have any other work done? Does Honda cover that?
Okay. On Hondas, there's a maintenance minder. They come on and tell you what maintenance needs to be performed on your vehicle. Depending on how you drive determines when that maintenance minder comes on. You do want to maintain your car. Obviously, there will be oil changes in that time frame. There will be tire rotations, possibly a cabin filter change or something like that on your vehicle. But it's just the normal routine stuff. And like everybody knows, the first 3 years of ownership is the least expensive time to maintain your car. So maintenance is going to be minimal in those first 3 years so that you can kind of budget. I know my payment's going to be X number. I'm going to have very little maintenance on the car. And you want to keep it up because it's obviously you want your car to run
vehicle.
properly and get the best gas mileage. But the maintenance is very minimal on the car.
Something you had mentioned earlier about mileage, I could pick how many miles. Do I want 10,000, 12,000, 15, you even said 20?
Right. Here's the way that works. Okay. Typical leases are 12,000 miles or 15,000 miles per year. Okay. And you really need to make sure that if you do one of those, that you are going to be able to stay within that. If you go over a few miles, typically with a Honda, you're going to trade it in and it's not going to matter. Okay. If you need more miles than that, people go, well, I drive more than that. I drive 20, I drive 25,000 miles a year. You can work that into the lease. Now, that may get closer to what a payment would, one of the advantages of the lease is to have a lower payment.
Okay.
Okay. So you may get closer to a regular retail payment by adding extra miles. But think about it. If you're doing 20 or 25,000 miles a year, you've got a 3-year-old car with 75,000 miles on it.
A lot of miles.
You're probably thinking about getting rid of it anyway. Well, this again gives you a guarantee of what the value of that car is going to be. And you can still purchase an extended service contract and put it into your lease to cover you out to those miles if you need it. So again, if you're driving that many miles, you either live a really long way from work or your friends, or possibly you use it for work and your car is more of a tool anyway. So you might as well, again, just set your expense up properly. And then when you get to the end, you can decide what you want to do. You can decide if you want to keep the car or trade the car or whatever you want to do. So you just need to explore it. You just need to see if it works for you if you drive that many miles. Now, if you go 50, 60,000 a year, I don't know. I mean, at that point, you probably need to be paying cash for something. Lease probably wouldn't work.
Okay. But so if I bought a 12,000 mile a year lease, but I ended up having about 15,000 miles, so I've gone way over, what happens at the end of my lease?
Okay. You have 3 options at the end of the lease, basically. You can buy the vehicle, you can trade the vehicle, or you can turn the vehicle in. And buying, people pretty much get. The turning in and trading in is where people get confused. Okay, if you turn the vehicle back into Honda, okay, and you've gone over on your miles, they'll send you a bill like any manufacturer for, depending on the value of the car, 15 or 20 cents per mile that you went over. It's not that much. If you trade the vehicle in, there are no expenses because basically the dealership's buying your car, paying it off, and those miles don't matter. Now, again, I want to be careful with that because I don't want somebody to do a 15,000 mile a year lease and drive 25,000 miles a year and go, well, you said that the miles didn't matter as long as I traded it in. It's going to affect the value of the car. But typically with a Honda, it's not, if you're just a few miles over, it's not going to affect it enough to where you're going to need to turn the vehicle back in. There are incidences where you might want to turn the vehicle back in. And this is also a huge advantage to a lease that I haven't covered yet. Everybody's aware of Carfax.
Yes.
And there's also, I think AutoCheck is another company that's out there. And what they do is they go back and look at the history of a car. Where did it come from? How many owners does it have? And most importantly, has it ever been in an accident? Okay, and you'll get what's called an accident indicator. Well, if you're purchasing your vehicle, if you paid cash for it or if you do it on a regular installment loan or whatever, and you want to go trade that car in or sell that car, and somebody looks up a Carfax, which nowadays, with the money that they're spending, 99.9% of the people want to see a Carfax or an auto check on the car, and it says accident indicator. They're probably going to take you off the list of a car to buy. They'd rather buy one without an accident indicator. They're not going to let you explain that it was something minor, or it might have been something that wasn't minor. Okay, and when you go to trade that car in, the dealership might say, look, your car has an accident indicator on it. We believe that it's worth, and it could be several $1,000s less than if it didn't have that. So if you're purchasing the car, you're the one that has to take the hit for that. I got 2 cars side by side I'm trying to retail to a customer. This one has an accident indicator, this one doesn't. Which car are they going to buy? And how much less am I going to have to sell them the car with the accident indicator for them to buy it? So if you lease a vehicle and it's involved in an accident and it appears as an accident indicator and you bring your car and we say, guess what? Your car's worth several $1,000s less because of this. Well, guess what? You can just turn it back into the manufacturer. They take the risk. As long as it's been repaired, okay, now the vehicle does have to be repaired, they take the hit. Okay. They go and they sell the car at auction and people look it up and see that it's got an accident indicator. The manufacturer takes the hit. So again, it's another advantage to leasing from the standpoint of, that's not going to come up. That devaluation isn't going to be your money. It's going to be the manufacturer's money. Also, another thing to point out with Honda, and again, this could be specific to Honda's manufacturer, they automatically put gap insurance. And most people know what gap insurance is. And they're not necessarily trying to do a really great thing for their customer as much as they're trying to cover themselves as well. Because they're trying to guess the exact depreciation of a vehicle month to month to month. So if that car were to get stolen or a total loss and the insurance company wouldn't pay off the balance, they need to have coverage for that as well. But you automatically get that. That's included in Honda's lease. It's not an extra charge to you or anything like that. You automatically get that that coverage on it. So, there's just lots of ways that, people are always thinking there's going to be some big surprise that's going to hurt them. And in fact, there's a lot of things that are actually much better than just buying the car.
So are there any surprises at the end of your lease?
Go back to, depends on the manufacturer, okay? And it's all in the contract, but basically with Honda, no. It's all up front. As long as you're aware of how many miles that you're buying, as long as you bring your car in and have it evaluated, they do inspect the car at the end. We'll start getting phone calls that, hey, we need to look at your car, emails, so that there's no surprises at the end of Honda has a $1,500 damage waiver, and without getting too detailed on that, you can have 3 incidents on the car of less than $500, and they'll waive that. So they're not going to go, oh, you owe us $100 for this little ding or $100 for this little whatever on the car. They're going to waive that, but they do that inspection before the end of your lease so that you know going into it. Other manufacturers might have that disposition fee that we talked about. Their wear and tear policy may be more strict. Okay. I know some of the more expensive brands, they're much stricter. But with Honda specifically, there's not any surprises. There's not something you're going to find out about as long as the dealership gave you all the right information and told you exactly, this is what it's going to be. And again, that they did right by you.
Great.
And a lease is kind of like, picking out the right glove. I mean, it's got to fit. It's got to fit how many miles you're going to drive. It has to fit the car that you want. It has to fit within your budget. And it has to do all that really without you putting any money down. And I know we talked about that before, but for me to try and convince a customer, hey, put $3,000 down to have a $100 lower payment, I'm really not doing them any favors because they're still spending the same amount of money. If they couldn't budget it without it, then they probably shouldn't budget it with the cash down. Now, there are certain incidences where people say, look, I know what I'm doing. I know that I want to put this much money down because this car's going to be for my son or for my daughter, and I'm going to let them pay the payment. So let's get it down to $200 a month and let them pay it. There's even people. There's a Onepay lease.
I was going to ask about the Onepay lease. I've heard of that, but I don't know exactly what that is.
Okay, a Onepay lease. The advantage to the consumer is that they get a better money factor, which is kind of like an interest rate, but basically the cost of money is less, and you pay all of your payments up front.
Oh, wow.
And by doing that, basically you write one check, which is the payments times the term, but you do get a break on the interest. And then you drive the car for 3 years and 12,000 miles a year, and you're like, well, where would that fit in? Okay, it might fit in for a business, or it might fit in for a parent that wants to buy even a teenager car. I mean, it sounds strange to give a teenager a brand new car, but you've got the peace of mind that they're in a brand new car, okay, with all the technology, the safety technology, the airbags, the side airbags, all of that. And if that Onepay lease is $7,000 or $8,000 for 3 years, 12,000 miles a year, that's cheaper than a lot of the used cars that are out there that don't have all the nice safety features that you're going to be constantly fixing. Absolutely. And then 3 years from now, the life situation can be changed. Hopefully they're going off to college and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it takes them through 1 year of college. And that's another thing is that the lifestyle deal. Some different things in people's lives change their transportation needs. Yeah. So 3 years from now, yours might be different. But a lot of times for people, that's another great reason to lease is, look, I know that we need this, but in 3 years we may start a family. We may want a bigger vehicle, shameless plug, a Pilot, an Odyssey. But right now they need a sedan. So, hey, let's make this fit into our budget. Let's get a sedan with the lower payment. And then in 3 years, we'll decide what we want to do. We have all these different options. Great. So,
is there any reason why somebody shouldn't lease? I mean, you've told me all the advantages and all the great things about it, but I haven't found a reason why I wouldn't want to lease one.
Okay, well, let's see. There are definitely some situations where people may not want to lease, and most of those are just the way they feel about the buying process. They want to own their car, okay? If somebody says, look, I want to buy this car, I'm going to do it on a short-term purchase at a very low interest rate, I'm going to get it paid off, and I'm going to keep this car until the wheels fall off. I want to drive it for 10 years. I don't like doing this process. I just want to buy it. My mom actually leases her cars, and every time they come up, she's like, well, maybe I'll just buy this one. And I show her the advantages again, and she's like, oh, okay. She goes, I'm just not used to this. Yeah. But if somebody truly just wants to buy a car and wants to keep it forever, wants to buy tires, buy brakes, pay for any repairs when they come up, then that person probably shouldn't lease the vehicle. And like we said, if somebody does a ton of miles, they probably should just be purchasing it. They're still going to kill the car in a couple of years with 100,000 miles on it, or however many they put on it. But that would be the person that may not want to lease a vehicle. Other than that, I don't really know many instances when somebody shouldn't at least consider it, shouldn't at least look into the numbers. Obviously I'm an advocate for Honda, but when people tell me, well, I'm going to go buy such and such car, and maybe it's not considered to be the greatest car on the market, reliability or whatever, but if they're leasing it, I'm like, well, they don't have to worry.
They get the best part of the car.
They get the best part of the car,
Right.
and they don't have to worry, well, what's the resale value going to be? Well, we're setting it up front. And so if it happens to be much lower than that, they simply turn it back in and go on. Obviously, I want people to lease Hondas. I mean, Hondas have the advantage. They have a much. I think that there's actually been some reports out lately about Honda having some of the highest resale values, which translates into the residual value, which is what Honda says the car will be worth. The higher that number is, the lower the lease payment is. So that's one of the other reasons that Honda is such a great car to lease.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.